Hey there, everyone out in viewing and listening land. By the time you hear this podcast is already going to be a few months out of date. It was recorded in May of 2020. This is an episode about where we were at in the process of making the anthology and getting the Precipice fiction business up and running at that time. Even though it's a few months out of date, I think you'll get a lot out of this. Enjoy.
Welcome to Prose and Cons, a podcast by writers for writers, brought to you by Precipice Fiction. Precipice Fiction would like to acknowledge the people of the Eora and Durag nations as the original custodians and storytellers of the land this podcast was created on.
Welcome to the Precipice Fiction podcast, Prose and Cons. I'm Ali Burnham, and with us today is Paddy Boylan.
Ahoy.
Alex Eldridge.
Hiya.
And James Healy.
Hello.
So this week, after several weeks, we thought we would do less of a masterclass at a topic and talk about us again. So we've been at our anthology journey for, oh gosh, when would we have started this properly? I'm not sure.
So bad with dates. I have no idea.
It's been several months. To the point I almost want to say like half a year or more.
I think at least a year.
I feel it could be a year and a half because I feel like Christmas. I feel like last Christmas this was a thing.
Yeah, I'm remembering everything now in relation to when COVID began.
Right.
That's like the only time.
That's why time doesn't feel real. Yeah, I forget it's already May this year. Anyway, we've been doing this for a long time. So we thought today's topic would be us reflecting on what we've been learning as we've been having a crack at this self-publishing journey and how we've been working together as a group and all the kind of new skills we've been forcing ourselves to upskill with as we tackle this project. Before we dive into the topic, though, I just wanted to go around the room and ask what everyone's been reading, listening, or watching to at the moment. What have you been up to, Paddy?
Moby Dick.
Still Moby Dick?
Yeah, still Moby Dick. And watching Ozark, which is pretty good. 6 out of 10. Apparently it gets better. Please skip to someone else. I don't have anything interesting to say.
First season of Ozark is amazing. Have you just started it?
Yeah, we're about halfway through the first season.
Amazing.
It's good, but after having seen Breaking Bad, I can't help but compare everything to that. At least between Breaking Bad and this, I'm getting a very good education on how to launder money. So, Precipice, if we even need to incorporate that into our business strategy.
We're ready. Good.
We're ready. Yeah.
How about you, James?
I've been reading a lot of short horror stories at the moment because I'm working on some horror stories myself at the moment. So I'm just looking at different ways authors have kind of tried to derive horror out of seemingly everyday events while trying to build tension towards their ending. I recently read, I don't have the author's name. I recently read the short story Afterward, which was an absolutely brilliant short horror story. Edith something, I can't remember her second name. Absolutely fantastic. It's a couple living in like an 18th century manor. And they've been made aware that there's a ghost there, but that they won't know there's a ghost there. It's not a very harmful ghost. It's just like afterwards you realize the ghost is there. So the two of them are just going kind of bananas in the house, kind of talking to each other, trying to figure out what is going on and when will they meet the ghost and will they know the ghost is there and stuff. So it's absolutely brilliant. Like I really, really enjoyed it. Yeah, that's been my reading this week.
What time because you obviously read a lot of horror. I was just curious what time of day you read your horror. Because I don't know if I was doing a deep dive, I would have to stop by like 6 p.m. No more horror.
Yeah, I made the terrible mistake of getting too sucked into Afterward, and I finished it around midnight on a weekday. And then I was lying in bed at 2:00, staring at my front door and staring at my window, just thinking like, no. Why did I do this to myself?
I really need to read more horror. I'm yet to experience that from a book. And yeah, I want to be really uncomfortable from a written story.
Yeah. I'd advise, like Ali does, read earlier in the day. Okay. Allow your imagination to have processed through it all, but it's before you need to go to bed.
Don't let your subconscious do it.
Fair tip.
Definitely not when you need to be trying to shut things down.
And Alex, what have you been reading, absorbing?
I've been reading a biography of Jack Dempsey, who was a boxer in the late 20s. Because I'm writing this novel sort of thing right now, which is it's like gamified gladiatorial things. And I just kind of wanted to get a feel for how the whole ecosystem around fighting games sort of works. So I've been reading a lot of that and then supplementing that with The Running Man, which is sort of the same sort of, it's a lot of like death game sort of things. I've been looking into that. Doing a bit of that. And actually I also started reading Yellow Wallpaper, Alex.
Hey, good. It's not too long.
Story. Yeah.
No, it's pretty short.
Like, so if I can make a recommendation, I'm always yammering on about Dan Carlin. I'm a huge Dan Carlin fan. He has a all of his stuff is long form. He has a particularly long form podcast episode called Painfotainment, where he dives into public executions, gladiatorial matches, all the sort of awful shit that people did in the past for fun and violence.
Helpful, really.
I recommend. It's
It's really good. Yeah.
Oh, you
gets
it?
into like
Cool.
I've read that one, or I've listened to that one. Yeah. It's like the societal response to violence.
Yeah.
Yeah. Really interesting.
Messed up.
For my own entertainment, this bizarre thing happened to me about a fortnight ago. So I've been listening to the Hamilton soundtrack on repeat for months, to the point I've been driving my fiance insane. He's really, really angry that I've memorized the entire thing and won't stop quoting
Hamilton for
him. So he encouraged me to listen to something else. He's like, pick any other soundtrack, do it. So I accidentally fell sideways into the Count of Monte Cristo soundtrack.
You sent that the other day.
I did.
What the context was.
It's because you said a line from one of the songs, and then I was just there immediately. So I was just sharing my mean brain space. Yes. But how I'm bringing this back to my writing is, for the record, I don't think it's an amazing soundtrack, but that doesn't stop it from just being embedded in my brain. And I do this thing where I'll just listen to something to death until I've like properly either absorbed it into my being or I've got it out of my system. So I'm in the middle of that at the moment. And there's just some like really key lines that are making me want to like go back, and not a massive rework, but it makes me just want to go back into my manuscript. And I don't know, musicals do this wonderful thing of just really prying out certain emotions, and I'm like, that's the emotion I was trying to capture in this scene, and then it just makes me want to dive back and just pull some threads a bit harder.
That's cool.
Yeah, so I'm ramping my way up into going back and doing that real like surgical, just plucking at that emotion, and almost thinking of it more as a musical than as a story. I don't know. Sometimes I find that inspiring when I'm trying to structure something. I'm like, well, if this scene was to boil down to like song lyrics, what are they actually saying? What is the want? And that helps me frame it sometimes. Because I know one of my weaknesses is getting, like, I'll focus too much on the high level thinking and not enough on the emotion. But going back to like a musical soundtrack, I'm like, it's 100% emotion is all they're singing about and all they care about. So that's been a part of what I've been absorbing. The other thing I've just been watching recently, I've discovered, is Derry Girls. And I was going to be like, James, do you know Derry Girls?
Yeah, Derry Girls is amazing.
I've just finished the second season, and then the third season's still quite new. But yeah, Nathan loves it. He's been studying comedy at the moment as well. So we're our household is nothing but Derry Girl references and accents as well at the same this week.
Is studying comedy just watching a lot of stuff in the comedy tab on Netflix?
Well, he's been doing a formal comedy course for actors.
Okay.
But because of that, he's tooling up and he's able to. So for a long time, he couldn't really talk like writing tools with me, and that was fine. Like, he would have acted. I've got a sideways anecdote that I hope's entertaining. So I called the two characters in Les Mis, the two mains. Anyway, I called the villain a villain, and it absolutely upset Nathan, because he comes from an actor and he's like, neither of these characters are villains. They've both got good and bad inside them. And I'm like, I get that argument. Also, structurally, one of them's the hero and one of them's the villain.
He's the villain.
I'm like, at least call it a heavy.
And I'm like, in a musical, which one's singing in the lower voice? Nathan, that one's the villain.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't take this. He's like, no, he's too much of an actor. He's like, no, I can't put those labels on them. He was ready to just, it was a thing. So it's interesting that he's been tooling up in some comedy language, which he's talking more structure and story stuff. So we now have a similar toolkit when we're just dissecting something like Derry Girls. So that's been fun, because otherwise it's always been like a writer-actor dichotomy when we watch something and argue about Les Mis. Anyway, bringing us all back to our topic for this week. Basically, I'll go around and ask each of you what responsibilities you've taken on board as a part of the whole Precipice fiction journey, and then we'll unpack it into some of the things that have been new to us. So Patty, what teams and responsibilities do you find yourself in Precipice?
I've sort of fallen ridiculously into like the business research role. I don't know anything about business. Before this, I would have called myself utterly unsuited for this role, but I'm doing okay. I enjoy research. So we're not a partnership. Did I explain the business structure? Will that just confuse and isolate people?
No, we can talk about our journey. So basically, we had to work out how we were going to formally organize ourselves and how we were legally going to do it. So I think that could be...
We are actually a business as well as just a group of friends that write. Sorry, go on, Ali.
No, but I think it would be useful to anyone who's listening who want to tackle the business side of things, and if we wanted to talk about how we struggled uphill to formalize our agreement.
All right. If this starts to get like eye-wateringly boring, you guys just call it and stop me. We're sort of a hybrid between a partnership, which is one type of business structure, and a sole trader, which is another. At least in Australia, partnerships are Byzantine and complex. So we originally thought, we're a bunch of people that all share a project and we're going to share the profits and stuff. Let's be a partnership. And that seems like a great idea until you speak to accountants and they tell you that it's a legal and financial minefield. I don't want to get into it. We've sort of transferred into being a sole partnership where Ali is the partnership entity. We are employees of Ali's, and Ali will pay us based on our work. We're still keeping our partnership structure to keep our legal IP, which is intellectual property under. So we are a partnership being paid as employees.
That's a good summary.
Yeah. Recommendation for anyone like listening to this. At least in Australia, partnerships are complex. There's a lot of things on government websites that say, no, this is a simple structure. It's not. I recommend sole trader. It works well. Pick the most responsible person and get them to pay you.
No, essentially it boils down to we will all have individual ABNs. If my ABN is
Australian business number.
Yes, there's our Australian business number. That's what we pay tax under and what we operate under with money coming in and out. So my ABN will be what purchases things, and when there's money to receive, when we start selling things, it would come under my ABN, my tax, and then I am either reimbursed for things that we've bought from the others, so sending out invoices, or in the same way, then I send out all the credits to everyone and pay everyone when there's royalties to share. But in terms of, as Patty was saying, copyright for our stories, that was kind of the thing we wanted to protect as an entity, because it didn't feel right that I would become, say, the owner of everyone's stories and IP, especially since in the spirit of what we're working on is our stories are appetizers for our larger worlds. So we wanted to make sure everyone's story is protected under the umbrella and it's not just one person. So that was our logic there. So yes, we had to spend, the legwork for us to work that out. We gung-hoed into the partnership, but then after speaking to accountants, we had to kind of reassess, and we're right in the middle of having to rewrite our partnership agreement to protect the new structure and make that all legally sound. All right, Alex, tell us a little bit about what responsibilities you've taken on in Precipice.
Sure. So I've been doing a little bit of the marketing stuff, which is good. I've sort of taken a little bit of a backseat to that, to be perfectly honest. But I've also been doing a lot of the audio, which in this case has so far been the podcast. And I feel like I've done a lot of I did a legwork to initially get it off the ground and poking everyone in the butt to start it going. Now it pretty much runs itself. But so there's that was fun getting that going. But I think the biggest thing that I've learned has really been appropriately enough, about editing and writing, and the value of being able to write something and then kind of ship it out to people for a read, and then getting something that you might have initially thought was pretty solid already, and then getting people to come back and go, well, okay, maybe this could be, fairly significantly changing it over the course of it. And I think just realizing the value of the beta read for me has been a really good thing. And that's really clarified a lot of things for me in terms of novel writing, which I'm doing a lot now as well, because it gives you a framework for these are sort of the hoops you have to jump through to get it to a point where it's like, okay, this is as close as you can get to a finished product. So yeah, that's been really fascinating in terms of just realizing that you probably can't catch all the things that are wrong with your story because you are too close to it. So just having the perspective of like anyone else, ideally a writer, but anyone else, just to go like, hey, what happened to that character? Like, they just sort of disappeared, and you're like, oh yeah, right.
You can never tell the parts that are going to be the people won't understand. There's no way of anticipating it in future. Things that seem perfectly clear,
or that don't really work as well as they do in the context as you think they did in the context of your story. You kind of get feedback from someone. You're like, actually, now that I think about it, that didn't make any sense, and that was not thematically coherent. So yeah, I might redo that. So that's been the greatest learning for me.
Yeah, for me, it's been point of view. Oh God, point of view. Like changing from one character's perspective to another for anyone listening along. Like, I'm not great at it. And it's the kind of thing where I think you can assume that you're perfectly fine. Like, yeah, this makes sense. This character's the focus. Now this character's the focus. When that reaches beta readers,
oh boy.
Oh boy.
Especially when Ali's one of your beta readers. Yeah, I know I like to keep a particular eye out for POV. I was lucky enough, I did a course through Writing New South Wales in 2019, and that was heavy on POV. And
I was going to say, it seems like a screenwritery thing to be paying attention to point of view. Where is the camera?
Yeah, it was almost a different learning curve in that screenplay. You can strap the camera to any character's head at any given point. And then at the same time, the camera can be quite omniscient when you want it to be. I'll just give a quick example. Say in a screenplay scene, the main character could be in a room with a bunch of people, then they leave, and the camera can stay in the room and get like the reactions of everyone after they've left. And pretty quickly, I worked out that if I'm writing the novel from this character's point of view, I can't leave the camera in the room after they leave. It seems so simple now that I've said it out loud, but that's a screenplay thing I do again and again and again. So I pay particular attention to people's POV just because it was such a gear shift learning curve for me that I had to go through. Did we want to unpack our editing process, just for those listening at home, just give a clear idea of how we've gone about sharing our work?
Yeah. Well, I mean, basically what we did was we wrote our story simply, and then we put it up on Google Docs. And then it was sort of like almost like a chat room free for all sort of thing. It's like PvP, like editing really, where you have someone leave a comment and then someone will comment on the comment and go, well, it's like the character turned mournfully to something, and someone will go, well, mournfully isn't really how they do it there. And then someone else will be like, well, actually, I found it a very mournful turn. So it just gets this it's sort of like a little Reddit like forum line sort of thing, thread.
Yeah, it's like a message chain.
And it could be like 12 comments on like a word.
Yeah.
Or not the word should be in the sense.
Which also produces some interesting conversation.
Someone could say, I bumped on this. Someone's like, I have no problem with it. I don't know what they're talking about. And then as the author, you can sit back and kind of be and take in both sides. And then ultimately, I think that's really healthy, being able to see the discussion without being involved in it. I'll share a small anecdote. So from our open writers group, I was there this week, reading a passage of my story, and I had it's fantastic outside eyes that I'm getting from it at the moment after being through the Precipice fiction washing machine of it. But I had one comment being like, oh, why does this character there was a question of my magic system, and it really pulled me up short because I hadn't considered it at all, and it's not something that had come up at all during our year of editing. James is laughing because I slipped into his DMs and I just had to vent. I just had a moment of like freaking out because I'm like, why have I never considered this? This would not change everything, but I'm like, this is potentially a change for the better. And James talked me back from that cliff a little bit, and gave his reasons why he thought it worked as it was, and it gave me the space to be like, oh wait, no, I do have a good answer, even though I just didn't have an answer in the moment to explain myself. After thinking about it, I'm like, no, there was a logic why I chose to do it that way. What I'm saying is that sometimes the discussion is healthy, being like, this person thought this reason for A, this person thought that for B, and then make your decision, because I think I have a habit of hearing feedback and then wanting to be like, oh, got to change it.
Yeah.
But seeing the full breadth of the conversation can be quite healthy for people like me that might make changes too quickly.
Just getting both sides of the balance scale. Another thing I also tend to find this, and I found this in the Open Writers group, is that people tend to have a bias in terms of what they'll pick on. For example, Patty is very functionally good at finding. It's like, what are you gonna?
No, I'm curious.
No, at finding capitalization. You're very, which is
Oh
good.
yeah.
Capital.
I'm an absolute pedant when it comes to capitalization.
Absolutely, someone has to do it.
But it comes from not ever knowing what capital letter to use, doing an excessive amount of research till it's just like burned into my brain. Yeah. And now I can't not see incorrect capitalization everywhere in the world.
Yeah, for sure.
Worse for me.
I go in to look at my drafts and Paddy has said, it's a capital letter for West here. And then later on it's like, no, you don't have to have a capital letter for West here, James. This is a different type of use of the word West.
Wouldn't it suck if I was wrong and I was just giving you like bad information this whole time? I don't think I am.
Gaslighting you. No, but yeah, you see people with like very different but consistent things. Like Natan, for example, will often comment on use of flowery language. He tends to like to strip it back, and I think that's something I internalized quite early. I now struggle to do things that are a little bit more ostentatious, which is fine. It's something I can work on. But certainly, you know, someone can definitely have a bias or a focus in terms of what they pick on. It's often good to bear that in mind as well, like your audience specifically as the person.
Sure.
I don't know if this is a universal thing, but I found I now have mini voices of all you guys already stacked into my head when I'm writing. So if I write a sentence and I look back at it and I'm like, no, Patty would hate that. So I rip it out. And so I've already like got these editors onboarded just because of knowing the things people will pick up on. Like I know I've said to James, I'm like, oh, James would want me to describe the environment a bit more. But like that's just how I phrase it in my head when I go back and I play with it.
Can we coin a term for this right now? Let's call them homunculi. You've got editorial homunculi of all the other writers, because that's totally a thing. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, once you spend enough time in a group and you get a sense of what people will pick at, that's that version of that voice is
informs it.
Yeah. And yeah, just to super clarify how we've been doing this, I think we're on to what it will formally be either our draft 3 or our draft 4. But essentially we've done a first round where we uploaded all our stories. We assigned a first editor to everyone's story. So they were the first one to go through and do kind of the close read and leave lots of comments. And then we made it the free for all where everyone else could jump on into the discussion. We rinsed and repeated that again. Did we do that twice or just, and then we rinsed and repeated that process. Then we went away, redrafted after the second batch of massive comments. And now we're doing something a bit more targeted in that now we're really close to the pointy end. Our stories are getting pretty tight. We've just chosen one other person that we're going to swap and be quite close with. And usually the logic was picking someone who was really on our case in a good way about something maybe we've identified as a weakness. For example, I could be like, oh, Alex was always commenting on this. That's been at the forefront of my mind during my last pass. So I want to take it back to Alex so he can see if I've implemented that properly. So we're just in the middle of our one-on-one swaps at the moment. And then the goal is that's kind of all the content changes we're going to be making. Our stories are going to be pretty close to locked development-wise. We're going to have one final round when it moves into what we're calling the interior team, who are in charge of the line edits. That's the last pass of grammar, punctuation, style guide thing.
Style guide. That's going to be huge, actually.
Yes.
That seems like it's going to be a big task.
Yeah.
Yes, as a group, well, we have our mini interior team who will have to hash it out amongst ourselves, design our style, agree what style guide we're going to follow, and then make sure all the stories adhere to that style guide. As I'm saying this out loud, potentially we've done it a bit arse about in that maybe having a style guide first would have been good. But at the time, we just wanted to write our stories, have them be creative, not worry about that. And now at the pointy end, we can do the fine line edit.
It's a learning curve. We're going to be better prepared for the next time. We didn't know what we were doing when we go in. Yeah, this is all just us learning and us finding out how to do it.
Definitely. And James, finally circling to you. So what responsibilities and which teams have you found yourself a part of in Precipice?
Well, I tried to lean into or lean away from the social media and business side of things into the creative side of things as much as possible. So I did put myself on the cover team, but I might leave the cover for you to talk about, Ali, the artwork and stuff. I'm also on the marketing team, but I'm kind of taking a little bit of a backseat on that because I think everybody else has a much better head for what they're doing than certainly I do. So I'm kind of just trying to learn as much as I can from them and then help out as much as I can. But I'm doing the distribution, which is basically the process of once we have our finished anthology, basically our manuscripts, how do we then turn that into something that people can purchase either online or in stores? So that was something that's completely new to me and I knew nothing about it. Turns out to be something I've really enjoyed researching and kind of getting my head around. I wouldn't have thought it would be something that I would have taken to, but the process of actually reading through how the process works and making sure that I understand, or me and the rest of the team understand everything that we're doing, so that when it comes time to launch and upload the book and have it ready to be distributed to the various sites that it can be purchased on or bookstores that it can be purchased at, just to make sure that we have everything lined up and ready to go. And it's a lot of kind of fine detail stuff about how to lay out the pages, whether we need, what dimensions we will need our book cover to be in for the online stuff, and then for if we are choosing to print it like a hard copy to get a back and a spine and all these little things that you have to think about. It just comes from a lot of research and from a lot of seeing how other people did it basically and what mistakes other people made. So that other people can be a little bit of a canary in the coal mine for it. There's been a lot of great resources on YouTube and stuff like that for anyone who is trying to get their head around it. There's a ton of people on YouTube who have done it themselves, who are happy to kind of upload tons and tons of videos about the pros and cons they found from going to different distribution sites and who they worked through, Ingram Spark and KDP and things like that. So it's been pretty good.
I feel sorry for anyone that has to go through this journey themselves. There is such a huge amount to learn. We can delegate between 6 people. To learn all this from scratch as one person would be Herculean. Yeah. If you're listening and watching this, props to you for doing it, because it's impressive.
There are resources there for it. There are resources like this course.
There are.
But we're probably bootstrapping it really.
But on that, to try and tackle it, we decided to break it ourselves into 6 teams, just to run everything through our internal logic, because I've kind of just, I guess, automatically defaulted, just because it was my initial pitch, my initial suggestion. So I've just taken this position as the one who keeps pushing everything along. I've been managing to a degree. So the kind of formula I came up with were these 6 different teams, breaking everyone down into the teams so they have a really clear idea that James can just put his distribution hat on and doesn't have to panic about interior stuff. So it's not 6 chickens trying to all focus on one thing at a time. Even though we do come back to kind of monthly meetings and each team can report in, just so we're always getting the okay from the full partnership being the cover team was thinking this. Everyone can be like, that sounds good, keep going.
And there is a decent amount of crossover as well, because
Yeah.
There's kind of everyone has somebody who is in another team that needs to coordinate with the across teams and stuff like that. So there's a fair bit of
the shared brain is helpful. So, for example, when you said you're the one who's been researching cover dimensions in distribution, it also helps that you're on the art team. So even though I've probably taken a bigger lead on the art team, you're there with those facts ready to go as the distribution representative. and that works really well.
And Matan, who's also on the cover team, is on the marketing team. So he's able to talk about the website and how the color can work between the website and the marketing.
And we're thinking about colors we want as a part of the art team, and that informs what Matan's going to be doing in the marketing team. And that just helps bleed across rather organically. So just to clearly outline what our teams are. So we have the art team, and we're justifying that as kind of the cover, but then also we're thinking of having illustrations on the inside. So it'll be part of the art team. We're just now thinking about starting to read. So we've come up with our own kind of concepts. We've been playing around, mucking around in Photoshop and Canva and stuff like that. So we have a sense of what we want now. So now we want to start approaching illustrators who are professionals and not just us playing around, who can, and now that we can bring our concepts to them. And then part of how that pipeline works is we would get their quotes, the art team, and then we'd bring them back to the full partnership team and get them to sign up. We would pitch this illustrator to them, and they'll be like, that person seems great. And then myself as the treasurer would then be like, all right, here is divided by 6, the budget that everyone pays so we can hire the illustrator, that kind of pipeline. So I've mentioned the interior team, and we're justifying that as the line edits team, but they're also the team that'll be compiling the final product, the final page. Alex, remind me of the name of the program we'll be using when we get there, or a program. Vellum. Yeah. So that kind of compiling, bringing all the words and images together to really create the document that will then go to the distribution team. The distribution team, as James talked to, are the ones who are basically, they're going to be the sellers. They're the ones who will be doing the upload to Amazon or whoever we go with, and handling the store side of things. And that can be quite a minefield in of itself, that whole area. So I'm not on the distribution team. That's why I'm talking about it as this big scary thing I don't know much about. But I'm just like, they will do the thing that makes it purchasable. We have the marketing team. So they're the ones who will be working on all the copy. So say our log lines, our back of the book blurb, our website blurb, just how we want to present it, how we want to talk about it, as well as we'll be setting aside some budget for ads on social media. And it's kind of the marketing team to really research who they want to target, the target audience, how all that advertising will work. Then we have a little social media team who's been quite quiet at the moment because there hasn't been anything to do yet, but we're primed and ready. We have all our Twitter, our Facebook handles set aside. But basically, once we start having content and the marketing team signs off on their copy, then the social media team are kind of their arms and legs and will be the people who do the physical posting. And kind of separating marketing from social media was a decision I made just through some of my own experience, that having the one entity do both of those things, be the brain who comes up with the copy, and then is also the poor bastard who has to sit on Twitter and upload things and that can be incredibly time consuming. So it was just separating the two brains. So the marketing team can just come up with the content, pat themselves on the back. And then just the arms and legs social media can just do the physical side of actually getting the content out there, because they're just two big jobs on their own. And then I think the very final team, I think I've mentioned all the others, is then the audio team, because I'm kind of backseat, but otherwise it's Patty and Alex who are the other audio team members. That's why we were kind of the very early practice group for our podcast, just to see if it would work. The podcast works in nicely as a branch of our marketing, but it is also, we want to do audiobooks. And we're just starting to think now creatively about actors to source for the audiobooks and getting auditions in and getting those read, which is quite exciting. I'm very much looking forward to that part.
Thinking about this, we were discussing how we wanted to go about doing it, if we wanted to, personally for my story and his, whether we wanted to get an actor or whether we wanted to read it ourselves. So that's going to be an interesting decision to see how that'll kind of work out. But yeah, I'm pretty keen to see how an audiobook kind of goes together. Like me and him both, I know Patty's done a course in audio production at a fairly high level, and I've been working with music programs for 20 years. So yeah, that'll be fun, kind of putting that, styling that all together and deciding if we want to put, how much ambience in it we want and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, that's going to be an exciting journey.
It's going to be so gratifying to hear our stories professionally spoken by an actor. It's going to be like, yes, it's real now. It's going to feel really, really good.
It is very satisfying. I have to say, I've been doing a lot of stuff on No Sleep, and a lot of the...
Which is a subreddit.
Yeah, sorry.
A horror subreddit.
Subreddit, like r/No Sleep, which is where you sort of post up a lot of stories, and then like a lot of the time, because apparently it's quite big money, YouTube narrators from like creepypasta, people who read out stories will actually reach out to you because it's theoretically what's Creative Commons? It's not really, but they can ask you if they if you want to lend it to them. And I've always been like, yeah, this is getting my work out there. I'm going to do this. And yeah, the feeling of having someone read it back and then seeing all the eyeballs of that it's very, very gratifying. But at the same time, sometimes you can be like, it's a weird inflection to put on that. So, interesting dichotomy, but it's good.
You might just be too close to it though,
Yeah, possibly.
Yeah, and I also want to give you a shout out, Alex, that you have done the music that everyone would hear at the start of every Pros and Cons podcast episode.
The epic boss battle that is the Pros and Cons theme music.
There was a lot of Pirates of the Caribbean and Game of Thrones influence there, I can tell you that.
I do kind of love that everything has been generated from us ground floor. So we in that we have our Precipice Fiction little logo. I think I'll credit mostly for Matan came up with the concept of this person standing on the edge of a ridge. And we went through then a few iterations of how we wanted this figure to look and what we wanted the ridge to look like. And there was all of that just so all the group was nice and happy. And also even just voting on something like a logo was a good little like test dummy for how the group dynamic will work, making big decisions like that.
Well, the name.
Voting on the name.
Wow.
Even just the saga of deciding to call ourselves Precipice Fiction. I don't know. That's why it feels like such a win every time we say it, because like we got there. Six creative minds managed to eventually unite and decide on a name they like.
And writers too. Like we're going to be the most pedantic about the names of things.
Absolutely.
There was like 3 voting rounds. It was intense.
At some point, there was a pot with like I want to say like 100 names in there, and we were voting on.
Yeah, it was about 100 names.
It was crazy.
We had like a preferential voting system.
But it's important.
Like
this is going to be us for as long as this project exists. This is what we're being known as. I think it's an important thing.
Yeah.
Like a band name, you want to nail it the first time.
Yeah. But, as Will Shakespeare said, a rose by any other name would smell as sweet, right?
As William Shakespeare said, why'd you call yourself Def Leppard?
I believe that is a direct quote, yeah.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
So, did we want to just... I'll quickly throw it back to you guys, but to talk about what is kind of next for us, because we'll probably leave it another 6-week gap before we talk about the anthology again. But what is it going to look like between now and those 6 weeks? For
putting this pod video cast online at the time that you're listening to watching this, we don't actually exist online. This is all still stuff that's amounting in the Google Drive. Getting this up is going to be really cool, and actually getting some feedback and listeners and people reacting to what we're doing.
Yeah, and as a branch of that, that'll kind of mark when the social media begins. So my brain is on that branch of it being like, great, we will, it's just a podcast is almost where we're going to begin, which is eventually going to lead to this product, which is an anthology that we can shout about at the end of developing a podcast pool of listeners.
Yeah.
What about you, Alex? What teams are you on and what are your next steps?
So I am on audio, as I mentioned. So the next thing for me will really be just editing a bunch of these episodes, which is, I know we discussed it, Patty, it is, I have found it, and look, I do have a tendency to underappreciate the amount of time that goes in, but so far I have found that it's been very easy. You really just need the front side of it and the back end of it, and that's sort of a template. And then occasionally you'll have to chop some things off. So I'll just be playing video games and like listening to it and going, "Oh, no, that was a bit of a faux pas," and we'll cut that out. But yeah, surprisingly, not too time consuming. So I'll be working on that, and I'll get those in the can, so they're ready to go. I guess we'll have to start looking into some interior stuff soon, so that'll be interesting. But I think the most important thing will be figuring out marketing and what that's going to do and how that's going to dovetail with both the cover and the social media stuff. So I'll be all hands on deck for that when that's happening. So yeah, it's
brilliant. And where are you at, James? This feels like a little meeting. I've suddenly gone into, all right, everyone chime in so I know where we're up to.
His progress report. Like Patty said, getting the podcast up is a big thing for this next couple of weeks. I actually still have to finish my most recent draft of the story. I'm kind of like really dragging my feet on that. I've got some editing to do, and I guess, we've just got some work on the cover to kind of figure out. And I suppose I'd probably have to just bite the bullet and make some social media accounts so that I can start interacting with stuff online. It's something I've avoided doing for years, but now I have a good reason to do it. So I guess I'll get the time out and do it.
Yeah.
And another thing we didn't really speak to that I will just quickly mention, we did a fun exercise of we planned the order of our anthology. So after everyone had read everyone's 6 stories, there was quite another rigorous back and forth about what is a logical flow. We wanted to curate first story, second story, to the 6th story. And that in of itself is a really fun creative process. Kind of thinking about which stories have similar themes but then which ones are too similar. And we don't want them being back to back. Which stories kind of end on a more positive note, which ones end on a sad note, and we don't want too many sad note stories in a row. For me, I even prioritized 2 of our 6 have, for lack of a better word, female leads. So I wanted to make sure they weren't grouped together. Those were spread out. And yeah, those kinds of decisions are dovetailing into having female readers for those stories, and male readers on our audiobook as well. So I'm really enjoying that whole creative process as well.
Yeah, it's almost like, again, a music analogy, but ordering tracks on an album. Like a good album just feels really good, but you don't always think about, like, why does that feel like a good opening track? Why does that feel like a good ending track? It's really making us sort of analyze what is it that makes a good opening story in an anthology, and like the flow of an anthology. And
I think it helps that it is 6 brains sorting that out, because the moment it comes to your own story, like for me, it's just
objectivity
a cloud.
dies.
It's like I can't tell where my story would best fit out of the 6, so you kind of got to listen to the group and let them tell you where they think your story fits. I know both Matan and James, because they're sitting up around the front, and both Matan and James are quite humble, and I think they seemed quite squeamish around the whole conversation, while everyone else is being like, one of these is our opener, and they're both they couldn't weigh in at all, being like not sure what the opener would be.
Yeah, that was good restraint, James. Well done.
Yeah, I was just sitting back and being like, oh, let everybody else kind of
rather than coming in hard and being like, yeah, no, my story should be first.
I was quite insistent that Matan's was first, and I think Matan did the same thing, and he was quite pushing for mine. So
yes. So you just cancel each other out in the conversation.
Yeah.
All right, we've pretty much hit time, and we thought, as a special, present for our listeners who have stuck with us for so long, they've heard us talk about Moby Dick quite a lot.
Oh yes, they have.
In that 3 of us have been concurrently reading Moby Dick as we've been doing this podcast. So
battling through the story.
So we thought it was finally time to share some of it with you. I'll hand it over to Patty.
This may require some judicious editing, I'm just telling you, Alex, because man is the language. I called it Byzantine before.
Yeah.
Moby Dick is a hell of a story. It's great, but it was written 100 years ago, and it shows. So if I trip over this and butcher it like a whale on a whaling ship, apologies in advance. So this is the main character, Ishmael, finally getting elbows deep into the spermaceti, which is that thick, viscous, wonderful oil that lives in the whale's head. I'm going to be saying sperm a lot. I'm talking about spermaceti. You're not 12 years old. Stop giggling.
It's not technically sperm.
It's I don't know what the commonality of the name is. Interesting etymology. Okay, squeeze. All morning long, I squeezed that sperm till I myself almost melted into it. I squeezed that sperm till a strange sort of insanity came over me, and I found myself unwittingly squeezing my co-laborers' hands in it, mistaking their hands for the gentle globules. Such an abounding, affectionate, friendly, loving feeling did this avocation beget, that at last I was continuously squeezing their hands and looking up into their eyes sentimentally, as much as to say, oh, my dear fellow beings, why should we longer cherish any social acerbities, or know the slightest ill humor or envy? Come, let us squeeze hands all round. Nay, let us all squeeze ourselves into each other. Let us squeeze ourselves universally into the very milk and sperm of kindness. Would that I could keep squeezing that sperm forever. For now, since by many prolonged repeated experiences, I have perceived that in all cases man must eventually lower, or at least shift, his conceit of attainable felicity, not placing it anywhere in the intellect or the fancy, but in the wife, the heart, the bed, the table, the saddle, the fireside, the country. Now that I have perceived all this, I am ready to squeeze case eternally. In thoughts of the visions of the night, I saw long rows of angels in paradise, each with his hands in a jar of spermaceti.
It's Squeezy,
I don't
squeezy.
even know what that second paragraph was about, and it's beautiful, but
Ecstasies of squeezing.
yeah.
I adored that. It came out. I was driving, listening to the audiobook, and that passage came out of nowhere. And it's the character having a religious experience. I was having a religious experience listening to it. It was just. It's up there with like my top 5 passages out of Moby Dick. Just adore it. For obvious reasons, there's a layer in that it's just entertaining. And then the other layer in that it's just about, humankind just needing to come together because of how wonderful sperm is.
Squeeze it.
Squeeze that sperm.
All right. Do we have a quote to end on?
Yes. I have a quote here from Nan McCarthy. Anyone who says it's easy to self-publish a book is either lying or doing a shitty job.
There you go.
Yeah.
Good inspiration.
I quite like that one.
All right. Thanks, everyone. This has been a podcast from Precipice Fiction, Pros and Cons. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
You're listening to Pros and Cons, the Precipice Fiction podcast.